Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 5, Day 2. Today's journal, we're going to be talking about this little quote. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Okay, so I'd like for you to go into your journal and tell me, what do you think this quote is talking about, and who do you think is saying this? So it gives you just a little bit of room there. Do the best you can. Doesn't have to be super long, just a couple sentences. Give me your best guess. Make it more than a sentence, but give me your best guess nonetheless of what you think it may be. And if you don't have a clue, give me a couple guesses. Now, today we're going to be talking about the causes of the Civil War. And one of the biggest causes was obviously slavery, and we know that. We know that that was an issue of contention. It's also important to note that slavery is not the only reason that the Civil War was fought. Um, One of the big reasons the Civil War was fought was over states' rights, and we'll talk more about that. But today we're going to be talking a lot about slavery and how that is affecting the Civil War. And one of the big issues was slaves that were trying to escape. And the Drinking Gourd was a slave song that was told throughout kind of various groups of slaves throughout the South, and it told of a route to escape to the north, all right, using the Big Dipper as kind of like your guide, and you would follow it to eventual groups of people who would lead you to the other side to freedom. Now, you can read through the words. I also highly suggest, I can't think of the singer's name, but it's an African American man who sings the Drinking Gourd, and he's playing a guitar while he's doing it. If you look it up on YouTube, you can watch it. It is fantastic. It's one of my favorite songs, actually. That's like played on guitar. I actually downloaded and listened to it for a while. I thought it was cool. I also love historical stuff like that, where it's an actual historical song. But anywho, essentially the Drinking Gourd was kind of the predecessor to the Underground Railroad, and it kind of went hand in hand with that. And Harriet Tubman was the leader of the Underground Railroad. She was known as African American Moses, and that she was kind of leading her people to freedom, and that she was, free, and she could have stayed free, but instead she came back to help her people. And she had formed an escape route to the north, which was the Underground Railroad, and she was one of the conductors. She helped her own parents escape along with 300 others, and she made some 19 trips to the south. By the time of her eventual death, she was close to a $40,000 bounty on her head. And by that point, she had helped a few thousand people escape. Quakers often helped her with helping slaves escape. And one of the reasons for that is that Quakers obviously were very much against slavery, that we've already talked about that was against their religion. And so Harriet Tubman's going to be very instrumental, along with the Quakers, in helping these African Americans get from various parts of the South to the North. Now, this map kind of shows you some of the various paths they took and where they were going from South to the North. They also use different patterns that they would put out, and this website probably doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. But these are two patterns just to kind of show you what some of these patterns were, and they actually have a whole group of patterns that were used. But essentially, it was patterns that was kind of like these rumors and these stories were kind of spread by word of mouth, and they would kind of explain the symbols to each other, from African American slave to African American slave, and when they would escape, these patterns and these quilts would be left hanging on various parts of the trails for these slaves that were trying to escape. And if they found them, it would tell them kind of where to go next. Okay. So, for example, the monkey wrench pattern to the left alerted escapees to gather up tools and prepare to flee. So if they saw that hanging somewhere, they needed to try to get ready to run away, that somebody was coming to get them. So if they saw that hanging out in the field, whatever. If they saw the drunkard path design on the right, this warned escapees not to follow a straight route, that basically somebody might be waiting for you, that they know this is a known escape route. Now, one of the other big things that we've talked about is Uncle Tom's Cabin. And we talked about that a little bit in day one. We're going to continue to talk about it in day two. Harriet Beecher Stowe, she had written this book, and she was able to show the truth about slavery to the North. And between this book and the fugitive slave laws, you're getting a lot of influence now in the northern states that are seeing what slavery is really like. Stowe had never been to the Deep South, but she had seen slavery on the Ohio border. Her book sold over 300,000 copies in 1 year. It was as far as in our terms, a bestseller and one of the most read books in American history to that point. The North loved it, the South hated it, and you can imagine why. It showed what the South didn't want people to know. So much so that this book was so controversial that Abraham Lincoln actually, when he met Harriet Beecher Stowe, told her, "So you're the little lady that got this war started." And that's a pretty bold statement to say that a book started a war, but it is one of the causes of the Civil War. Now, another cause of the Civil War is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. In 1854, Stephen Douglas introduced this act to organize the territory, which was above the 3630 line. Now, the issue here is that the property's already been organized, but they're going to try to organize it again and try to kind of clear up some issues that were kind of left open with the Missouri Compromise. And that was kind of the problem, is it was almost like it was nullifying the Missouri Compromise, and everything that was put in place in 1820 is just gone now. This is going to lead to the creation of the Republican Party, which we already talked about. The Republican Party is going to feel like this is one of those things that, we need a party that supports, free soil and kind of this message from the Whigs and all these things. Now, it made abolitionists very, very mad that this act was being passed, because it almost seemed to be supporting the fact that slavery was spreading, rather than, kind of keeping it balanced where, okay, slavery's here, freedom is over here. We're not going to mix those two. That's clear. But now it wasn't clear, and that's going to cause a lot of contention. Now, you've got a lot of territory that's up for debate here, from Kansas to Nebraska to Utah to New Mexico. Those are a lot of territories to form during that time. And it seemed that they were forcing slavery down the throats of the free soilers. Those people who were in Kansas and Nebraska, and people who thought that they were going to go out there and be on free soil where there would not be slaves, and something they just didn't support. And unfortunately, it feels like the government was, quote unquote, ramming it down their throat. Now, two governments formed in Kansas. They both had an election, and when it was left up that the Kansas that popular sovereignty would decide, people from Missouri had crossed the border and they voted. Which way do you think they voted? They were pro-slavery. And so what ends up happening is there's a pro-slavery and anti-slavery government actually claiming legitimacy in Kansas. So you've got two governments that actually have formed, which is going to lead to some skirmishes between the two. The other issue here is that in Lawrence, Kansas, it was an anti-slavery town, and it was attacked by pro-slavery people. In an attempt to fight back, John Brown, a radical abolitionist, fought back and went to Pottawatomie Creek, he and his sons, and they attacked a pro-slavery town, killing 5 pro-slavery men, and pulled them from their beds and hacked them up with swords. That's pretty serious, all right? And you can imagine the violence that ensued from there. Brown was forced to leave the Kansas territory and to flee, and a mini civil war is going to break out in Kansas over the next few years. And you can read through this. This kind of tells you the issues here and what kind of leads to Bleeding Kansas. And John Brown, by some, is seen as a hero, and to others, he's seen as a little bit crazy. In all honesty, he was probably a little bit too radical for the cause, but he is kind of one of those causes of the Civil War. His actions, along with other pro-slavery, he was anti-slavery, but other pro-slavery members are going to kind of also lead to increased violence and issues because of the way they act. Now, here are your questions for the day. Make sure you're getting these answered. And then here are your 4 vocabulary words. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I'll talk to you soon.